You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, welcome, everyone. You are listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense, and I'm your host, Doug Thorpe. Today, I have a special guest, Mr. Liam Naden. He's going to talk to us about a journey that he's been on and some realizations and revelations in his life, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, let me say, Liam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Liam has an interesting situation. Liam, tell everybody about where you're calling from and how you're calling in.
Well, I'm speaking to you from Belgium, actually, in Europe. It's part of my travels as a permanent traveler. I live on a boat, and we spend our time just exploring at the moment the canals of Europe. And talking to nice people in between.
Yeah, it's a neat and interesting experience, I'm sure. If any of you have been there and been on the various rivers and canals of Europe, it's a fascinating life. And if you've seen those folks out on the boat, now you're talking to one. So
that's right.
Well, Liam, give us let's dive right in and give us a little bit of your backstory. You're a business leader, an entrepreneur. You've had the cycles up and down a couple of times. Give us the details on that.
Sure. Okay. Well, probably like many of your, if not most of your viewers and listeners, I've really spent most of my life pursuing success. And one of the ways we do that, of course, is through business. And I've had my own businesses, lots of different businesses in different industries over the years. But and while I was growing these businesses, and some were more successful than others, I was always struck by the fact that in my pursuit of success and happiness, I always seemed to have a lot of problems. You know, the more I studied success in its various guises then I went to business courses and personal development courses, goal setting, all of the usual things that you try and do to become more successful. But I still couldn't figure out why, even though I had all this knowledge, I couldn't really find an approach or a way of really getting a handle on my life and feeling in control of my life. And as I say, I tried everything: spirituality, religion, I've been to I went to seminars all over the world, read all the books, tried all the techniques. And then something happened in my mid-40s, which should never have happened. And that was I lost everything. I became homeless. All of my assets that I built up over the years were gone. And I was going through a bad divorce as well, which is probably a large part of, why I lost everything. But this really hit me in the sense that I thought, I know everything there is to know about how to be successful. I know how to set goals. I know how to do business strategy. I know how to apply all of these techniques, changing my beliefs, working on my inner self, all those sorts of things. I'd spent a lifetime studying these things. So knowing all that, how could I end up in this situation? How could I end up homeless, penniless, and completely unsuccessful and completely unhappy? And in that state, I realized later that I did something different. But by doing that different thing, something completely different to what I'd done for the previous 45 years odd, in doing that different thing, I suddenly found my life worked an awful lot better. And as I came out of the other side of that bad situation, I started to attract good business opportunities. And I started to do the things I really love to do, like go canal cruising in Europe. And things just seemed to flow a lot more easily. I found a relationship that was much more healthy and fulfilling for me than I'd ever had before. And I was making all the money I needed to do everything I wanted to do. And the best part, I didn't have any stress or problems. So what I did was I went on a mission to back engineer. What was I doing differently that I'd spent all of those years studying all of those techniques that that hadn't worked, what was I doing now where actually things really were working? And it's that which led me on to what I do now, and which is coach other people into understanding who we really are, how we really function, and how we can create a life where we can effectively deal with any problems that we have, where we can stop attracting and creating more problems. Because I'm sure, as you know, that a lot of the time if we have problems, it's spent trying to solve a situation that we probably was through some bad decision that we should never have made in the first place. And I really developed it into a system to both to understand what worked for me, and now I'm coaching other people and showing them, and they're getting the same sort of results, which is very gratifying.
Well, that's really powerful, and you're absolutely right. I have had my own experience personally and professionally coaching others with that kind of roller coaster effect. You set out a goal, or you think you have a vision to create a business, and you take off down that path, and through a series of events, most of which are self-made, right?
That's right.
You either have this wild victory or a very unfulfilled outcome. And as you were describing that, one of the things I think about is, maybe it starts with improper framework. I mean, however we were nurtured to think about this elusive thing called success in the world. Is it the size of your bank account, your sense of fulfillment? What is it? What is the real measure of success? And I think for just about anybody, that definition is wildly different from one person to the next. And how does your new direction help define that idea of success?
Well, actually, the funny thing I found, because of course you're right, maybe everyone has a different definition of success. But when I tried to figure out what success really is, one major clue is to look at the natural world, because the natural world is totally successful. There is no failure. There's life and death amongst animals and plants and things that are living. But everything lives in its own place. And you could say nature doesn't really have any problems. So I thought, well, we're a natural being. We can disagree on everything else about who we are, but we can all agree that we have a physical component and we live in a physical world. So I thought, there's a good starting point. Is there a clue there about success? What our natural, if you like, way of operating is. And there certainly is, because we actually have a biological purpose, and that is to be successful. If you ask any biologist, what is the purpose of all life, including human life, the real purpose, the fundamental purpose, is to create more life. That's what every species exists for, is to reproduce and create more life. Now, the best way you can do that as a human being, for instance, and that is our biological purpose as well, we're wired to do that. The best way you can do that is to be your happiest, your healthiest, which is your most successful, because true success is actually being happy and healthy. In fact, it's even narrower than that. It's just being happy. That is what everything that you're striving for, that you call success, what you're really striving for is to be happy. You just think all of those things, like the money, the business, the lifestyle, you think they are going to make you happy, but the ultimate is what you really want is just to be happy. And biologically, we have a purpose to be happy, because there's actually a biological word that describes us when we're in a happy state, and that's called homeostasis. And homeostasis is something that all living creatures have in common, and it's defined as the perfect functioning of the organism. So when you're in a state of homeostasis, which is when you're really happy, everything about your body, as well as your mind, is functioning perfectly. Your breathing, all of your organs, they're operating perfectly, and they only do that, they only operate perfectly when you're in this happy state, this success state. So really the definition of success, whatever, there is only one definition, and that's to be happy. Because as I say, when you're happy, you're living biologically the way you're supposed to be living, and you're providing yourself the greatest ability to live a long and happy and healthy life.
That's an interesting, that term homeostasis. It is an interesting reality. And when you said that, I was reminded of, in my younger days, I can't do it anymore, but in my younger days, I was a distance runner, and I didn't do it for competition. I just did it for, my own sense of well-being. And I always had that experience. The first, 5 or 10 minutes of the run were kind of uncomfortable and awkward and didn't feel good. But as I pushed through that, I could feel everything sort of falling into rhythm and sync. It was like all of my organs were harmonizing in what they needed to be doing to sustain the run. And then it, once that gear clicked, then, going that extra distance, whatever I had intended for that day, was really not bad at all, and from a training standpoint, I certainly cycled my rhythms on the amount of mileage I was piling up. But that feeling of hitting that perfect homeostasis with everything in sync and harmonizing is the best way I know how to describe it.
Yeah, and there's something very interesting about that, because what you're describing has been described by artists, musicians, creators, and athletes, and they've used different words to describe it besides homeostasis. They call it being in the zone or in the flow. But there's something really interesting on a biological level that happens to you when you're in the flow and you're in the zone. You activate something called the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system. I'm not trying to throw too much jargon in here, but there's something really interesting. Your brain activates this thing called the parasympathetic nervous system. And the funny thing that what happens then is that is when you are able to access your full potential as a human being. So all of your creativity, your insights, your gut feelings, everything, make the right decisions, they all come from this place. When you get that aha moment, you could be doing something completely different and you're feeling good, and you suddenly get this idea on how you can grow your business or how you can solve a problem that you've got. It's because your brain switches to this place. I talk about this in my programs. I have that there are 4 parts of your brain, and when they're all working the right way, you activate this connection, if you like, to your intelligence, your infinite intelligence. And this is where the answers to problems, the answers to problems don't come from what's stored in your head, from facts and things that you already know. They come from intuition and putting together new thoughts and new ideas. And that all comes from activating this particular brain state. But here's something really interesting. When you're stressed, when you're worried, when you're feeling anxious, when you're afraid, you shut all that down. And the problem for most people is they're trying to solve their problems, they're trying to work out their life, they're trying to figure out what to do, trying to figure out how to be happy, when they've shut down the part of their brain that can show them how to solve the problem. Einstein once said, the same brain that solves a problem can't be the same one that created the problem. And that's another way of describing it. So the real trick here is, if you want to be successful and if you want to make the right decisions and be effective, you have to find a way not to be stressed, afraid, worried, and fearful about your life situation, no matter what it is, because you literally block your awareness, you block your ability, or your brain's ability to see the big picture, to see reality, to see what to do, and to be able to make the right decision. And people, and you see this all the time, people are making terrible decisions because they're stressed, and they come up with all sorts of irrational ideas. And I've been there. I've made some terrible business decisions, and you think, why did I do that? Or not just business decisions, life decisions. It's because you're stressed, and your brain in that state doesn't have the ability to show you the big picture.
Yeah.
So this is at the core of what I'm really teaching, and it's so important to understand.
One of the other aspects of that, and I'm right there with you on everything I've read and studied about this dynamic. It's the natural design and wiring that we have when we are under stress or experiencing fear and doubt. We are wired for that classic fight or flight mode of operation, and it goes back to the root of us, our need to survive. So when we're in fight or flight mode, what I've been told is that there is a chemical shift in our brains, and all that horsepower that's in that frontal lobe for the reasoning and logic and decision making loses blood flow. It's not even energized and activated while you're in fight or flight. It's actually being protected. So the higher the stress level, the more your tendency to put in that fight or flight gear, so you can essentially not even activate that part of your brain that's going to be made for good decision making.
That's absolutely right. And when you think about it, that's the way it's supposed to function. It's perfect. Your fight or flight is a marvelous tool that you have for survival, but it's only designed to be used in one situation, and that's when you're facing an immediate threat or danger to your survival. So if you see someone running at you and about to hit you, of course you're going to react. You're going to shut down you're not going to think about it. You're just going to react. We're going to jump out of the way of something about to hit you or whatever. But the problem is, so in that situation, you don't want to think. Your brain is telling you thinking is going to be too slow. If you stand and try and figure out what's happening and come up with a plan to react to it, you're going to be dead. So your brain has this marvelous tool to be able to switch off all of your thinking, logical, rational, creative brain in that instant to deal with an immediate problem. But the other thing it does is it blocks off anything positive in your environment. And this is why when you're in a negative state, you see things as far worse than they actually are. There shouldn't be anybody on the planet who's unhappy, because we live in the most abundant time in history, the most amazing stuff at our disposal that people even 50 years ago wouldn't have, they would have said, if I could have that, I'd be so happy. But when you're in a negative state, you can't see all of that. You can only see, I've got a danger here and I've got to get rid of this problem. And the real problem is that it's supposed to be used when you are facing an immediate threat. But if you're living in a constant state or a near constant state of stress and anxiety, what your brain is actually telling you is that there's a danger and a threat there that isn't real. Your brain is believing that there's a threat, but there's not actually one there. It's just one you're creating in your mind. So people think, well, if the stock market goes down, I should get all stressed and panic and sell everything because, I could lose everything and become homeless. Now, that doesn't make any sense on a logical level, but people don't see it that way because their logical thinking brain is shut down.
Yeah, I've got a good friend. As stock markets have gone up and down over the years, his wife is always the one that's kind of in a panic, let's sell, let's cash out. And he said, dear, all we're going to do is secure our losses if we do that. And he said
exactly.
that, no, we have to, it's a long game. You have to hang in there and you have to weather the ups and the downs. Yeah. What do you think is the one thing that holds everybody back?
In a word, fear. Fear of making a mistake, of doing the wrong thing, of not achieving what you want, of being unloved. At the core of everything, what I've found of human behavior is if you're struggling, it's because you have a combination of fears. And of course, fear is what activates the sympathetic nervous system that shuts down all your ability to really see what your opportunities are in life and what you should be doing and what you could be doing. And it also shuts down your ability to bring opportunities to you. And, this thing we have, the brain, it's not just some little tool that we can use. It's connected to the most astounding level of intelligence. If we really understood what our brain can do and how powerful it is, we would know that it actually could provide the answer to any problem that we have. And it knows exactly what you need in your life to live your ideal purpose, to be in that perfect homeostatic state. Your brain already knows that. You don't think you know it because the thinking part of your brain is so limited. But there's a much bigger part that does know all of these answers.
Interesting.
If you're worried about, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to solve this problem? Then you just block all the access that you have to that. And the funny thing is, many people profess to follow a religion, say Christianity, but they don't actually follow what the instruction manual, say that the Bible, for instance, is. Because in the Bible it says more than 300 times, do not be afraid. More than 300 times. Now, they don't say that because this is a nice idea. It says it there because this is the way you are afraid. You're not functioning properly. So, this is the core. The way we're supposed to live is to live in this perfect, in the flow state and not be afraid of anything unless it is a real danger. Because, of course, you don't want to go through life, not being afraid of a train that's coming towards you or something that is life-threatening.
Right.
But we have all these imaginary fears of things that we think could happen to us. And none of them, they're just not true. And they're not real, but they're what are driving our life and stopping us getting in the flow, in the zone, making the right decisions, doing the right things, and seeing our life turn out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Well, that's powerful stuff and good advice. And Liam, it's hard to believe we're already up to the halfway point of the show here, but thank you for all this. We're going to take a short commercial break and then we'll be right back.
Have you ever been called a natural leader or wished that you had been? Well, it turns out that's a bunch of baloney. Anyone can be an amazing leader with the right coaching and mentoring. Doug Thorpe is an author, speaker, and mentor for new managers, known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, providing them with the tools, action steps, and ways to improve their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. Doug will take you to the next level, whether your business is nonprofit, government, military, or religious. Doug Thorpe's coaching methods are practical and have proven to create amazing managers out of average employees. The return you will see from calling Doug is calculable. You can find health, wealth, and happiness while mastering the demands of learning how to lead others at DougThorpe.com. That's Doug, THORPE.com. Get coaching or learn from Doug the DIY way by ordering his new book, The Uncommon Commodity, that will give you a leg up on your competition immediately. That's DougThorpe.com.
Welcome, everyone. We're back, and today I am visiting with Liam Naden. He is a self-actualized authority on finding success and, more importantly, finding happiness in life. We've been talking about that in the first half. If you somehow missed that, just hit the replay button and go back. But Liam, we talked about the one thing that kind of holds people back in this, and you said it was, in a word, it was fear. But for those friends of ours that are kind of perpetually afraid, what's the process to get out of that? How do you get away from that mindset?
Well, I actually teach this in a program I have where I've developed a technique called Neurostate Rebalancing, which is about rebalancing your brain to get it working properly and only identifying something to be afraid of when it is actually real. But in essence, the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out, what is it that I'm afraid of? What is making me feel bad? And 99% of the time, it's nothing to do with what's in your environment. It's what you think that means. So, for instance, if your wife comes along and says to you, I want a divorce, I do a lot of marriage and relationship coaching. And in fact, this is how I really got to figure this out, was because for 99% of people, if their wife comes along and says they want a divorce, they get in a complete panic and they get all stressed. And then that means they start doing all the wrong things. To carry on with that example, if you've got problems in your relationship, you're afraid that relationship might end, or that the consequences for you of that relationship might ending what they might be are really bad. So in other words, if you think, well, if my marriage ended, I could never find anyone as good, or I'd be a failure, or I'd look back on my life with regret, or my children would really be hurt by all of this. If you have all of these fears underneath, you're going to do all of the wrong things in that relationship they're going to make it worse. And such things include trying to fix all your problems, trying to talk about things, going to counseling, getting, taking it all too seriously. And they're all the traditional ways we try and fix problems in our relationship. And funnily enough, they're not really generally effective. What you need to do if you've got problems is you need to say, okay, well, I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. And when you're like that, you're in a much more easygoing, powerful state, and you're a much more attractive person. And maybe your wife says to you, well, maybe I don't want to get a divorce from you, or whatever. That's a bit of an example. I don't know if I explained it too well there, but it's an example of when you're in a negative state, you're going to make all the wrong decisions because you're afraid of what you think a particular outcome might mean. When I had my own business, it used to puzzle me a team member that wasn't performing well. I'd spend so much of my time trying to fix that problem with that particular team member rather than working on the parts of the business that were working right and working well and developing those. What I should have done if I was in a better emotional state and mental state was what I would have said, look, it isn't working, that person needs to go, and no hard feelings. But because I was afraid maybe, they would be unhappy about leaving or they'd create a bigger problem because I wouldn't be able to find somebody else to fill the role. So then I'd be struggling to hang on to this. But it's all based on fear, and I was making all the wrong decisions based on that fear. So the thing you have to do is figure out what are you actually afraid of that's making you feel anxious and afraid. The last few months or years, there's been a fascinating study I've seen in human behavior that people have this fear of death, and of course the media is perfectly designed to get you into a state of fear and anxiety, because when you're in that state, you're also a lot more susceptible to manipulation and control.
Right.
But, it creates, people have this irrational fear of death. But if you really look at it, what is death? There have been more than 10,000 documented cases of people who've been through a near-death experience, which means they died on an operating table and then were brought back to life. Nearly every single one of them said the same thing. And that was, why did you bring me back? It was so much better on the other side. Oh, it was marvelous. I didn't want to come back here.
Right.
That's what all religion teaches us as well, and it's what science has proven. There is something out there. Yet we're all afraid of this thing called death, and by being afraid of it, you have these irrational behaviors and irrational beliefs, and we stay in the state of anxiety. So it's really important to figure out what you're afraid of, or should I say, what you've trained your brain to be afraid of. What information you put in there through the media or your upbringing or whatever to have made you think that there's something means pain, like death means pain, the end of a relationship means pain, losing all your money means pain, your business going downhill means pain. None of those things need to mean pain at all. In fact, all of them, the opposite is true. The best thing that ever happened to me was losing everything. So, and now I know not to be afraid of that. And then I can perform and function a lot better and make a lot better decisions because I'm no longer held back by the fear that is making me make the wrong decisions.
There's a quote that I love from, the American folk hero, Mark Twain. It goes something like this. He said, as I look back, my life has been a horrible series of tragedies and disasters, most of which never happened. And it speaks
Exactly.
to that idea of, we conjure these things up in our minds and we struggle with them because of the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if? And most of the time, and none of that ever happens. So we've just burned a lot of daylight and emotional energy, fearful of those things, causing us to be very unproductive elsewise. So that's very
Absolutely.
interesting for sure. So why do this is maybe a really simplistic question, but so why do you think people have problems in their life?
Well, quite simply, they're using their brain the wrong way by operating from a state of fear and anxiety, which, as I say, activates your sympathetic nervous system, It blocks your awareness. It blocks your ability to make effective decisions. It blocks your ability to see things as they really are. And it also stops your motivation to do the right things. So, it's a little bit like, your brain is a machine. It is designed to operate in a specific way. And if you use it the right way, like any machine, it's not going to create problems for you. If you think about your motor car, it's designed that you get in, you turn the key and you say, I want to go to X, and you do all the right things, and it takes you there smoothly and easily. That's what it's designed to do. But if you get in your motor car and you've put in the wrong fuel, and you're looking at all these pedals and levers, and you've still got the handbrake on, and you're pressing the brake instead of the accelerator, and you're sitting in the back seat looking the other way, your car is not going to take you to where you want to go. And if you struggle to get there somehow, it's going to be an awfully uncomfortable ride, and you're going to have all these problems that show up as a result. And it's simply because you're using the machine the wrong way. And you'd say, well, that's silly. You know how to drive a car. Why would you do all those things? And it's the same with our brain. Our brain's designed to work in a specific way. Why would you use it the wrong way? If you use it the wrong way, you're going to have problems. And if you use it the right way, like every other machine, you're not going to have problems. So in a really true sense, if you have problems in your life, and this is a controversial statement, but it's absolutely true, if you have problems in your life, all it is a sign that you're using your brain the wrong way. Mm. You're using the machine of your brain the wrong way. And that's what happened to me. I had this life before the crisis, if you like. I had all sorts of problems and stress. No sooner did I overcome a few problems, more kept showing up. And after that, and I started to use my brain differently, in actual fact. I didn't have any problem. I still don't really have any problems in my life. It sounds bizarre, and I'm not trying to sound like a hero, but it is actually true. So that's the key to understand. Problems are just a sign you're doing something wrong. And if you figure out how to do it right, your life is going to go the right way.
Well, not to get overly scientific in this, but I've read articles that describe the natural thought process in our brains. If we adopt a certain thought habit or thought process, the synapse in our brain, they fire these little electrical charges to make that path work and make those logical things happen. And there's a phrase that synapses that fire together, wire together. Pretty soon there's a hardwired connection there. It's not just a gap with the neurons firing across it, but it's an actual hard wiring, which means you potentially can get into a thought pattern that becomes far too natural. And so if you're guilty of that, you've got to shift your ability to think about the situation differently and practice that for some period of time so you can essentially reprogram your brain.
Yeah, well, I think there's elements to that are true, but the problem is what that's led us to believe is that you need to reprogram your brain, and it's to do with your thoughts. But the truth is, if you look at your life, and anyone listening or watching, really think about this. If you think about the really significant things that have happened to you in life, that have shaped your life, whether it's meeting your spouse or finding business opportunities or a job or whatever, all of those things, I'm pretty sure if you're honest, you'd realize had nothing to do with your conscious thinking. In other words, you didn't sit down the day before and say, I'm going to meet this person tomorrow who I'm going to marry and have 3 children with, and this is what's going to happen in my life. There is actually, the things that shape our life are beyond our thoughts. And we're busy out there. Someone said, life is what comes along when we're busy making other plans. But might have been Mark Twain, actually. But, we have these goals lists, and we say this, we try and figure out what we want. But our life actually goes in a different direction. It goes in its own direction. So I think the role of thoughts is very overrated. It's not our thinking brain, our thoughts, that actually is in control. It's another part of the brain which I refer to as the creative brain. So the problem when we try and say, let me change my thoughts, I spent years doing affirmations, listening to hypnosis tapes and practicing all this, I am this and I am, literally for years. And I didn't just do it once in a while. I'd carry around cards and read them 20 times a day because I went to seminars that said that's what you should do. You should sit down and write a goals list. You should figure out what you want. But my life still went in its own direction. It didn't seem, I didn't really achieve the goals that I wrote down. And all the affirmations, if I was really honest, those sorts of things and reprogramming tapes, they didn't really work. And the reason is that's not the part of your brain that is responsible for how your life works out. You need to tap into that part of your brain that is in control. That's your infinite intelligence part, the part that finds the partner for you, that brings the business opportunity to you, that gets you to make the right decision at the right time, that gives you that gut feeling. I remember going into a house years ago, and I went in there, and I was looking to buy a house, and I said, I'm going to buy this house. It was 3 times the price that that said, you're going to own this house. And that's what happened. And when you come across something that is a real goal that you're going to have, that's a very different place to try to figure out what you want, because you get what you're supposed to have, not what you think you want. And I think this is a really important distinction to make, because, as I say, people are trying to figure all this stuff out. You've got an infinite brain machine that already knows the answers. You don't need to figure this stuff out. You don't need to do any quote unquote reprogram. You just need to keep yourself in that mental state that allows you to be in the zone and the flow and all of the right things to show up in your life. And again, in the Bible, they talk about this. The Bible says, be like little children. Little children will enter the kingdom of heaven. What are little children like? They don't set goals. They don't, try and figure stuff out. They don't reprogram their brain. They live in the present moment in a happy state and just go with the flow. That's the way our brain's designed. But of course, the opposite of that is fear, because you can only do that if you're not afraid. If you know that everything's going to work out perfectly in life, then you can only, it will, because it just flows. Now, it might not go in the direction that you think it should. It's like, for me to be happy, I need to make this relationship work or this business work. That might not be how you're supposed to be happy. You might have to lose it all to be happy. It might be part of your path. So you have to let go and allow these things to show up. Allow your brain to do the work, that it be the machine it's supposed to, not try and figure it all out, because you don't know the answers on a conscious level, even though you think you do.
Yeah. Well, as you say all that, I'm also reminded of the scripture that says, worry not about tomorrow, because tomorrow will have enough worries of its own. So it's that live in the present. And the other side of that I'm thinking of and reflecting on a couple of my own personal experiences, get to that place where you can be open to opportunities and not just programmatically open, saying as in, I want to grow my business, but no, say, here's what I do, here's what I'm working on, here's what I know I'm good at. Now let me pay attention to things that are going on around me and see if one of those things is in fact a new opportunity that can bring value and become the next good thing to happen. Yeah, I like that, Liam. Well, sir, it's right near the end of the show here. This has been fascinating. We are going to post some information in the show notes on how to get a hold of Liam and learn about his programs and his materials. I encourage you to go there. And Liam, is there a quick word you want to say about the best way to contact you, world traveler that you are?
Yeah, simply through my website, liamnaden.com. All the information is there, and my own podcast episodes, which I cover a lot of this in detail, and that's all there.
Very good. Very good. Well, Liam, again, thank you for being my guest today. It's been a pleasure visiting with you, and have safe travels over there. Hope it's all going well. Well, folks,
Thank you.
this is the end and another episode. Thank you for listening in. I want to remind everybody the title of the show is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. My passion and desire for you is that you take a look at the situation around you and don't overcomplicate it. Find an easy to understand, common sense solution to the problem you may have. And as we learned today, don't let fear be a factor there. Just look at it from a pragmatic way and let your brain do the heavy lifting for you, right? So thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.